Hello, friends. This is Doug Schaible, and welcome to the Premature Bible Institute. Trust you've had a good week. This is 4th of July for me, and didn't have anything to do this evening, so thought this would be a good time to get this next lesson worked on. Just want to thank you all for listening so far. It's just been a real blessing to have you involved, and I trust that these will be a blessing to others too. And remember, if you have some friends that want to sign up, have them look for me on using my name, Doug Schaible, or Premature Bible Institute. Go to their favorite podcast or on YouTube and look up Doug Schaible, and you can find these video portions, and the audio portion you can do on your favorite podcast. Just look up the Premature Bible Institute. Anyway, today, just want to remember what we talked about a little bit last week. Remember Abraham and Lot separated. They went their own way. Abraham said, listen, it's not good that our herdsmen are fighting with each other or arguing about things, and there's not enough land for both of us, so whatever direction you go, I'll go the other way. If you want to go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. And so Lot decided to look out at the land. He saw that the plains down by Sodom and Gomorrah were better land than where he was at. And so Abraham said, fine, you go that way, I'll go my own way. And as soon as Lot had left him, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said, listen, I want to renew my promise to you. And now that you've done completely what I told you to do in the beginning, back here in Genesis 12:1, you remember he says, now the Lord had said to Abram, he said, get out from your family, your country, from all your relatives, and go to a land that I will show you. Well, up to this point, he still had family with him, which was Lot. But now Lot is the final relative that's out of the picture, and now Abraham is, God's renewing that promise to him and telling him he's going to be, have so many descendants you can't believe it. There's going to be more than you can possibly imagine. And the land that you're standing on, look to the east, the west, the north, and the south. Wherever you walk around, that's going to be your land. And it says that Abraham believed God, believed the Lord, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. So God was putting righteousness to his account for later on. And so it's kind of a neat thing that Abraham was declared righteous even before he was righteous, if you want to put it that way. But God can do that. He told Abraham that his descendants would have a future, and he actually told him what their future was. He told him that one day they'd be a stranger in a strange land. So they would go to another land that was not theirs. They would be in captivity for about 400 years. They'd be afflicted and oppressed. Then they would return to Canaan, and they would possess the land, and they would be so many that they couldn't be numbered. But one thing bad, the only thing that was, I guess, on Abraham's heart maybe, was that Abraham would never live to see it. He would die in a good old age, and your days would be long, and he'd have a good life up to the point, and then he'd pass away, and then eventually his descendants would come into the land. And at that point, and also God told Abram and Sarai that they would have a son. Now, up to this point, Abraham did have a son, but his name was Ishmael. That was done through Hagar, which was a bondservant or a slave of Sarah's or Sarai's. And so, but that wasn't the line that God wanted the deliverer to come through. He wanted to come through the line of Abraham and Sarah. And so he told her that she would have a child. And so they laughed about that, and they thought it was kind of funny at the time, thought it was rather ironic. And here are people that are really old, and they're getting up there pretty good in age at that particular point. So, and then God changed their name to Abraham and Sarah, which means father of many nations and mother of kings. And so royalty would come from them. Not only that, but also one day the deliverer would come through them also. So God goes on here from this point on, and so now the scene changes a little bit. We're going to go to the lesson now. So God's concerned. He starts off this chapter here talking about, or not this beginning of this chapter, but he talks about two cities in a place near Abraham, and one of them was the place that Lot went to, which was Sodom. And then there was another place called Gomorrah. But there were other cities in this land also, in these plains. And he had heard there had been a cry out against it. We don't know where it came from. It could have been from Lot. It could have been from his family. It could have been from all kinds of people. Maybe the people of the land were being abused by these people, by slavery, or who knows what. We'll talk about that part of it here in a little bit. But anyway, this cry came out about them, how wicked that they were, and so the Lord decided to come down and check it out for himself. Now, it isn't that the Lord didn't know what was going on. He wanted us to know that he was going to be personally involved in this situation. There was going to be no second opinion about whether God thought this was, if somebody misinterpreted what God said, God himself was going to deal with the situation, so he was going to come check it out. In Genesis 18, verses 20 and 21, it says this, "And the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And if not, I will know." So what he's going there, he's telling us, basically, he says, listen, I'm going to go down and check this out on my own. There's not going to be any second guessing about whether this city is as bad as what people say it is or not. So God, during this time, he comes down to Abraham and Sarah. And they're really old at this time. They're about 99 and 74, I think, at this particular time. And so they were living in tents, it's not like, pup tents like we're used to. They were pretty lavish tents, but they weren't living in a dwelling that was permanent. They were living in a place where they could move around. And so Abraham and Sarah were there, and these three men came to visit them. And so Abraham bowed to the ground and told them to come in, and he told Sarah to get some food ready for them, and they had to kill a sheep and so on. And these three men, Abraham didn't really realize at that particular time maybe, but they were angels. And one of them was the angel of the Lord, which is a reference to God himself appearing to people, especially in the Old Testament. And so they came and talked to him, and they told him about all the things that were going on, and he asked them what they were doing. It says, we're going down to Sodom to check out some things, or we're going down that way, and we're just scouting out the land a little bit. And so he had them stay with him. So the next day they got up and got ready to leave, or I can't remember exactly how many days they were there, but they were there for a little bit. And then the Lord told his other two angels to head off towards Sodom. And the Lord stayed there and visited with Abraham. And so he was visiting with Abraham, and he says something to us, basically, is to let us know what he was thinking. In Genesis 18, verses 17 through 19, it says this, "And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him." So he wanted Abraham to be a blessing to the people he came in contact with. He didn't want the people to affect him. He wanted Abraham to affect the people. And he wanted him to be righteous before these people so that they would be drawn towards Abraham, not the other way around. So God decides that he's getting ready to head down to Sodom, and he decides, I think it's good that we tell Abraham what's going on here. So the two angels, they start off. They head off on their trek down to Sodom. And Abraham and God are talking about this. The Lord tells Abraham what he's getting ready to do. And it says this in chapter 18, verses 22 through 33. "Then the men turned away from there and went towards Sodom." These are the two angels. "But Abraham stood before the Lord. And Abraham came near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked?" In other words, Abraham knows what's going to go on, that they're going to go down and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and the plains, all the cities around there. He said, are you going to destroy the righteous with the wicked? And he said, suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be judged, or should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And so Abraham is pleading with God here. He says, Lord, this can't be the way you are. You are a righteous person. You will do the right thing. He says, would you destroy Sodom if there were 50 righteous people in this city? And this is a big city. Sodom, Gomorrah, 2 large cities in these plains, the whole plains, a lot of people there. Would you destroy it for 50, if there were 50 righteous people in that city? So the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within that city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Then Abraham answered and said, indeed, now I, who am but dust and ashes, have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose there were 5 less than the 50 righteous, or in other words, 45. Would you destroy all the city for lack of 5? So he's saying, Lord, he says, okay, you do this for 50, but if there were 45 in there, would you destroy the city then? And the Lord said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, suppose there should be 40 found there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 should be found there. So he's working this thing down. He says, man, he's thinking about all these people there. What if there were righteous people? Would you destroy it if there were 30 righteous people in there? And so he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, indeed, now I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found there. In other words, Abraham's whittling this down. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So the Lord went his way, and as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So Abraham whittles this number all the way down to 10 people. Now I'm sure that he might be thinking about 10 people, that there were 2 daughters, Abraham, Sarah, Lot and his wife, and then his daughter's husband. So that would be 2, 4, 6 people. So would you do it? Would you save the people if there were 10 people? So Abraham's saying, listen, I know that there are 6 that I know down there. If there were even 4 more, would you destroy it? He says, I won't. So I said, okay, I'll leave it at that. I'll trust at that. So I'm sure Abraham thought he probably had his bases covered. So the angels are on their way down there, and they start to approach Sodom. And Sodom comes up there, and he said, no, once again, let me back up just a second. God is giving Sodom and Gomorrah and the plains there a chance. And he says, listen, if I find even 10 people in there, I won't destroy it. But we'll find out whether he finds 10 people or not. So Lot was really bothered by all that he saw going on in Sodom. He was there. But before that, it says, now the 2 angels, chapter 19, verses 1 through 3, now the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. And what that means is he was sitting in a place of authority. And it was a place where people went to, or if you were sitting there, you had a lot of influence, a lot of recognition by people. He was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, the 2 angels, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. So he was showing them respect. I don't know if he knew that they were angels or not, but he, for whatever reason, he seemed to recognize that they were people of importance. Maybe it was the way they were dressed, the way they carried themselves, who knows. But he went down there and bowed himself to the ground. And he said, "Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise early and go on your way." And this would be customary if you have somebody that you really respected in your home. You'd wash their feet, you'd feed them, have them spend the night, and then take off the next morning, send them on their way. And they said, "No, but we will spend the night in the open square." So what they were saying is they were going to go out into the open square in the center of the city, and that's where they were going to spend the night. Now, once again, what God is telling them is that or what the angels are trying to do is do what God told them to do. Remember, God says, I'm going to go down to this city and see if it's just as bad as what people really say it is. Now, he, of course, knew what it was like. But he was going to go there, and the angels were going to go into the center of the city where they were out in the open and see what would happen and whether the people would repent or not. Now, the angels may not have known everything, but God certainly did. And so we will spend the night in the open square. But then Lot says this, "But he insisted strongly, so they turned in to him and entered his house. Then he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate." So he did what he would normally do. See, this is what a righteous person would do. A righteous person would see a guest coming in or a stranger, bring them into their home, feed them, take care of them, and send them on their way appropriately. But evidently, evidently Lot was really scared and knew what the consequences of them staying in the open square were going to be. And how do we know that? 2 Peter 2, verses 7 and 8 says this, and delivered righteous Lot, in other words, these angels did, they delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul from day to day by seeing and hearing their lawless deeds. In other words, when Lot was there, even though he had his possessions and stuff, and maybe he couldn't figure a way to get out of it, maybe his wife wanted to be there, maybe his kids wanted to be there, family obligations, who knows what it was, but he didn't pull himself away from there. And so staying there, even though he was a righteous man and didn't get involved in any of their activities, it just bugged him to no end. But it didn't bug him enough to leave, and that was one of his problems. So then it says this in chapter 19, verses 4 through 7. Now before they lay down, talking about the angels, before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both old and young, not just old people, but young people too, all the people from every quarter, from all over the city, surrounded the house. And they called to Lot and said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may know them carnally. In other words, they wanted to rape them, sodomize them, do whatever it is they needed to do, beat them, any way to treat them that. But specifically it says carnally, so they wanted to rape and sodomize these guys. So Lot went out to them through the doorway, shut the door behind him. So what he did is he went out, shut the door behind him. He didn't want anybody getting in there, and he tried to plead with them, don't do this. This is unthinkable to do this to people that come in. It's just a cultural thing that if people come into your home, you guard them with your life, and so on. And said, please, brethren, do not do so wickedly. He said, just begging with them, don't do this. This is wrong. So, and we also see that, but I want to explain something to you too here, and I'm going to read a scripture to you that will explain this. Sometimes we think it's just those two cities. We say, oh, they're like Sodom and Gomorrah. But you know what? Every town is like Sodom and Gomorrah. Even in our country, in other places, there's stuff going on behind the scenes that none of us know about that is just awful. We hear about people that are brutalized and murdered and tortured and all kinds of things. All over the world, this type of stuff is happening, where men and women are raped and just treated awfully. And so this isn't just something that's unique to this particular town. They did it out in the open. They didn't try to hide it. But a lot of people here try to hide it and do those things also. So, and even later on in Scripture, there's the country of Israel is spoken to by God. And he says this, in Ezekiel 16, verses 49 and 50, it says this, look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, and abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy. And they were haughty and committed abomination before me. Therefore I took them away as I saw fit. So what he's doing is he says, listen, Jerusalem, listen, Israel, you are just like those people in Sodom and Gomorrah. Just like them. So it isn't that one place is worse than everybody else. There are all kinds of places. There are times when people don't act like that. But don't think that this stuff doesn't go on all over the world. And he hasn't judged us the same way he's going to, well, we'll talk about this here in just a second. But just remember, sin is part of what we received from Adam. Adam and Eve, all they did was eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which God told them not to. And what happened? They were dealt the death blow. The second thing that happened was that Cain and Abel. Cain killed his brother Abel. He brought an unacceptable sacrifice. God judged him. The people in the time of Noah, they were just as evil, and only 8 people came out of that. And so at the Tower of Babel, God scattered the nations. All kinds of stuff has happened. So I just want you to know this. Now, I want to read you a little bit here to talk about what happened. So Lot is talking to the people, tell them, don't do this. Please don't do this. And so then it says this in verse 10. But the men reached out their hands, talking about the angels, But the men reached out their hands and pulled Lot into the house with them and shut the door. So they shut the door themselves. And they struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they became weary trying to find the door. So even in their blind state, they were trying to find this door and get in there. But they couldn't do it because the angels blinded them and they couldn't find it. Then the men said to Lot, talking about the angels, "Have you anyone else here, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whomever you have in the city? Take them out of this place." So the angels are telling him, get these people out of here. And here's why. "For we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So God is going to destroy this place, and he sent these angels to do it. So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who had married his daughters, and said, "Get up, get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city." But to his sons-in-law, he seemed to be joking. In other words, they were making fun of him because he said this. "Oh, what do you mean that he's going to destroy it? This isn't going to happen. There is no God. It's a heathen city. They didn't want the Lord. They were just like the people in the time of Noah, and they're just like the people at the Tower of Babel." So Lot went out and spoke to them. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." And while he lingered, in other words, I don't know if he was trying to work on them, they didn't want to go, and he was trying to convince them to go, and the sons-in-law and whatever. And while he lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hands of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful to him. So this is why he is. He's being merciful to Lot. And they brought him out and set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they brought them outside, that he said, in other words, the angel said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed." So he's saying, man, don't even be anywhere near this place. These towns are in the plains, and everything in the plains is going to be destroyed. Get out of here and go to the mountains. So what does God do? God does what he said he was going to do. He always does what he said he's going to do. And so in verse 24 and 25, "Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens." So he overthrew those cities, all the plain, all the inhabitants of the cities, and what grew on the ground. 2 Peter 2:6, it says this, "Turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly." So, even though he killed them, he's still using that as an example to people who do live ungodly. Don't think that I can be mocked. One day, where it says the Lord will not be mocked. Whatever a man sows, he reaps. If a man sows corn, he doesn't get apples. If he sows pears, he doesn't get asparagus. If he sows sin, he's going to reap sin. If he sows righteousness, he will reap righteousness. And so, anyway, so he put them outside the city, told them, run to the mountains. And if you could read the rest of it yourself, or part of that, the next few verses, it talks about how Lot asked the Lord if he could go to a city rather than the mountains. And so he said, okay, go to the mountain, or go to the city, the name of Zoar. And he says, you can stay there. And then he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, God did. And as a result of it, it scared the dickens out of Lot and his family, and they headed for the mountains. But on the way, or as they're getting ready and seeing Sodom and Gomorrah destroyed, here's what happened. In verse 26, it says this, "But his wife," talking about Lot's wife, "looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt." Now, I thought that was kind of an interesting how it said there, his wife looked back behind him. It didn't say look back behind her. It said look back behind him. So maybe she was in front of him, and he was trying to keep her from turning around and looking back there. Maybe she wanted to go back there. Maybe that's the whole point. He was trying to convince her to go with him, but she didn't. She turned back, looked at that place, and the Lord turned her into a pillar of salt. Why? I don't know. But he did. So he and his daughters escaped. So God knows all of our intentions. He knows what's in the hearts of people. He knows what they really think. You can't fool God. And when we get into the New Testament, I'm going to read a particular verse that will really, really bring that out. But God knows what we think. He knows what's real in there. Like I said before, we can hide things, what we're really like. I remember some years ago, I was at a mission conference, and a guy made a statement that I thought was really, really good. He talked about abusers, whether it's sexual, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever the abuser is, the abuse is. And he made a statement I thought was a really interesting statement. He says, he said, all abusers operate under a simple philosophy. And the philosophy is, I can deceive better than you can discern. And how many of us fit into that category with whatever it is that we do that's not right? How many of us have learned to deceive better than you can discern? And that's the thing we have to be careful of. God isn't deceived by anybody. He discerns everything correctly the first time and every time. So he knew what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah before he sent the angels down. And so the cry came up, and the Lord dealt with that. And so, but he still provided a line with Lot and so on. So Psalm 139 verses 1 through 4 says this, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. That's the Lord. He knows everything. That's what omniscient people are like. They know everything there is to know. And God is righteous and holy, and he will not allow sin to go unpunished. And so these people were rebelling against God. They're the descendants of all the other people, of Cain, of the people in the time, well, not the people of, they are the descendants of, all of them are the descendant of Noah, but not are all, the deliverer's not going to come through all their lines. He had 3 sons, remember, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So it was going to come through the line of Shem. So all the other lines that have gone on, the Sodom and Gomorrah, all the Ur of the Chaldees, all these are descendants of Adam and Eve, and we've all inherited that nature, that propensity to sin. And so the only way that we can do that is if we believe God. We believe God, and we trust him to guide and direct us. Once again, that's the end of this lesson. And remember, if you have friends that want to listen to this, point them this way. Get on YouTube or their favorite podcast and look up Doug Schaible, Schaible, and have them find this. And thanks a lot for coming to my podcast. I'll see you next week. Bye.